Hello, and welcome to part 3 of this discussion about communion amidst this pandemic, COVID-19, and maybe, hopefully, if not in this one, maybe another one if the conversation goes on and we get some feedback or thoughts, maybe what communion and everything looks like when we get to the point of coming back together, because that's all of this is really just up in the air, and right now are somewhat concepts of what that'll look like. And of course it depends what these things will look like depending on our geographical area, because it's all different all over.
Yep.
We didn't do this in the last one, but I'll kind of reiterate what Pastor Jeff said in the last episode, but I know I forgot what that was. No, what did you say? You gave an introduction. Well, I don't remember, but I just wanted to
Go back, watch the beginning of part 2, and then come back.
Yeah, but I just want to reintroduce ourselves. Pastor Andrew Gukin in Rochester, New York, and then Pastor Jeff Sieber in Ohio.
Let's just leave it like parts unknown.
Oh, parts unknown. Yeah, okay. So, yeah, and so I also mentioned that because it's really based on geographical area. I mean, here in Rochester, as of May 21st, our cases went down a little bit with COVID, but now they're starting to rise again. And what we need to remember with that, I don't want to go off on a whole COVID thing, but what we need to remember with that is those new cases are people that were sick 2 weeks ago. So before things opened, and we'll see how that goes. But, like I talk about my family in Michigan, they have like one case in the whole county. So it's just different. So I don't know why I talked about that, but I think it's just something to consider too in this discussion. So we had finished the last episode. I keep calling these episodes, so whatever.
They were. Once we get sponsored, they'll be episodes.
Ooh, once we get sponsored. But we concluded there with talking about both communion and baptism, and how do we see it? Do we see them as, if in a sense, if we do one, do we have to do the other? Are they the same? Are they in a sense equated? Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, do we have the same, do we have the same process for living both of them out, celebrating them both? I mean, I know that there's differences in the elements, but are they as means of grace? As a Lutheran, you had to drop that Lutheran bomb on you.
Yeah, you did.
Uses of means of grace, are they, is our criteria for what makes something a sacrament the same? And therefore, if it's the same for both of them, that's what makes them a sacrament. Therefore, what implications does that have for how they're carried out, how they're celebrated? And are they different? And for the, I apologize, I'm looking at this not because I'm trying to be upset, but somebody just texted me about a member, extra prayers. I'm also going to destroy a couple of dogs. Hey, can you not, please? Trying to tape something important here, so keep it to a minimum. All right. Yeah, he's a dog. Hey. So, but to build off that suspense was a little bit, and we just, so everyone knows, we have not discussed this further. Like, this isn't like, talking point. Like, you take this side, I'll take this side. It truly, and Pastor Andrew just threw his hat into the ring and was like, hey, you were kind of insinuating that we should be looking at these as equal, and I think you're an idiot.
I did not say,
or not idiot, but how I hear things and what was stated was, and I don't know if I would take the same position. So I guess that's kind of where we're going to move with this, because even though it might seem like we've moved away from the whole virtual communion and COVID-19 and how to deal with that, I don't think we have. I think, as we discussed in the very first episode, that there are a lot of layers to this, and all of these factors that we're talking about go into what eventually becomes our answer of, do we do this, or why not do it? I mean, we could have very easily come on here and there wouldn't have been a point for a video. We could have very easily reached out to both our congregations and just said, yeah, we're not doing it. And that would have been it. But just this is kind of like a behind the scene, our thought process as to why it is the way it is. So do you want to give your view on them not being similar, or equivalent in how we deal with them, whatever you look at it, whatever perspective you have from it, or do you want me to give mine as to why they are?
Oh, yeah, I'll talk about it a little bit, because again, I mean, it's, as I've said before in different episodes, it's ever evolving, and it's ever evolving for me in terms of communion and how we understand that, and then baptism, how we understand that, both in normalcy and in the midst of now and then whatever in the future. Because it goes back to, in the other episode where I was talking about in the Lutheran Identity and understanding of the emergence clause. Again, I don't have the right word for baptism. Mm-hmm. So it's a conflict for me, because you brought something up in the last episode that is a conflict for me, because if someone comes to me, we have private baptisms, or we have baptism amongst the congregation. Mm-hmm. So ideally, baptism is among the congregation. Mm-hmm. And every time someone comes to me and they're like, oh, I want to have my baby, or I want to be baptized, it's like, all right, so we need to have a conversation about what that's going to look like. Mm-hmm. I said, baptism includes, that's part of the service. It's not a separate mm-hmm. service. However, if someone comes to me and they're just like, and we talk about it, and they say, you know what, I really don't want to do that. And does that mean I'm going to deny them that sacrament?
Right.
And my thing is, no, I'm not going to do that. Mm-hmm. So usually what I've done.
Do you think I would?
I would say no.
I wouldn't deny someone. I haven't had that happen to that extent where someone was really like, if you're telling me I have to do it in front of other people, I won't do it. Yeah. I haven't had that situation arise, but I would like to think that I would say, okay, we'll figure out something, but then we'll still recognize it. Yeah. As a congregation. But yeah, so I guess what I'm wondering is, and you're continuing to flesh it out, what does that mean as far as, because it seems like this is a part of your, part of the foundation of your belief that they're not equal. And so for me saying that I think they are equal, and me saying that I would do exactly what you would do, I would still do a private one if I had to. So we're not different on that yet.
Yeah. But okay, yeah, so what that brings up, so I wouldn't do that. Or I would do that. Right. I'm not going to deny someone that sacrament. So you had brought up, okay, well, what about like a virtual baptism? Mm-hmm. And then you gave the example of, I'll stand here on Zoom, and then you're over there, and then, let's say, you're, we'll have Melissa put the water on your head.
Yeah.
My immediate feelings with that is I would be okay with that. Okay. Because I would be saying the words, but I think that falls into that priesthood of all believers. Just like the example I gave of the EMT.
Me being in a car accident.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, but and again, that kind of, it's a bit fuzzy because, it's not necessarily an emergency baptism for you, but
Mm-hmm.
okay. Um, it's sorry. It's not an emergency, like if we do it this way,
Right.
but it's kind of that God is working there, and
Yeah.
really anyone can baptize. I mean, like Luther even
Right.
said that.
Yeah.
That's what the whole thing was. So now here's the rub.
Here's the rub. I knew it was coming. I was waiting for the rub. Yeah.
So where I'm comfortable with that, I'm honestly uncomfortable with virtual communion for a different reason. And that reason being that, and again, evolving, because I'm really still trying to understand it.
Yeah, me too.
Again, God can do anything, but the question is, should we do it? And my immediate answer is no, because communion is the community, and that's our Lutheran identity. It's the community gathered. So, it gets to the point where if I'm here on Zoom or whatever, and I'm like, in the night in which he was betrayed, okay, grab your bread or whatever, and that right there makes me do this, whatever.
Yeah, whatever is not a good thing. Yeah, we agree with that. Yeah.
It's because there's a consecration there.
Mm-hmm.
If me doing this virtually, does that consecrate the elements? I don't think so, because it's not what my words that do it. It's the Holy Spirit. So again, I mean, and I know that
the Holy Spirit can't do it. Yeah. So the Holy Spirit, if it's being communicated, if they hear they're not hearing when you're doing when you're doing the words of institution, they're not hearing your words. They're hearing God's words. Yeah. So if they're hearing them, but kind of what we had said in the last one too, of like, all right, does that affect it if it's pre-recorded? Like if I would never get up into a church service and be like, well, every week I always say, in the night in which he was betrayed, the Lord Jesus took bread, and go through that. And so, I'm just going to make a recording of that. And so when it gets time for it in the church service, I'm going to hit a button while I'm undoing the bread, and it's going to play on a loudspeaker. This is what it does. And I just hold it up and, pantomime it. I wouldn't do that, because there's something in that act of intimacy, even of me relaying what Jesus has said in the midst of the community, whether it was me and one other person in the service or whether it was me and in a larger group. However, for the baptism thing, and this is where I think that they're equal, which doesn't make, so I'm going to point out, even though I think they're equal, I don't know if it helps my case as to whether or not to do virtual communion or to not do it. But for me, for the baptism, a worry, the slippery slope, I know there are exceptions. However, if we say that a virtual baptism is okay, then why is that something once quarantine is over that we still always offer people? Do we always offer, we have these dates available, and if you're not available those dates, we can always do it online,
No, yeah, that's a good question.
So, yeah. But I mean, like I said, I know it's an exception. It's just, I haven't had anybody ask me to do it. But I mean, I also, and this is going to potentially sound horrible, I also had, and I didn't watch the whole clip, but I also would have issue with somebody, the priest I saw using like the super soaker or whatever and shooting people at that. Like, if it's a fun thing, I get that. But if he was actually baptizing people that way, like, there's a part of me that goes like, you can do that, but there's something lost. And maybe that's it for me. And it doesn't mean that this is theological. Maybe that's my hang up, is in baptism and in communion, there is an intimacy of God acting. And right or wrong, there's something about being in those moments and having, whether it's a baby or an adult being baptized, whether whoever it is coming up to receive the sacrament, to receive the wafer or bread and the wine or grape juice, there's something in that connection. It's like there's something happening in that. And I feel like something is lost when it's not happening in person. Like I just, and like I said, maybe it's just a feelings thing, and there's no theological ground to stand on with it. But I'm not saying I wouldn't do a baptism that way if I had to do one that way. I'm not saying I would never, I won't say I'll never do virtual communion because I don't know what the future holds. But as a standard practice, I think our Lutheran identity, as you pointed out, really states that there's just something about us being together to do this. And, it's not something, it's not even about what God can do. It's just something about what it says about us. It says we're a community. And yeah, I know I've gone on a tangent there, but I just trying to figure out a way to put into words my feelings about what happens in that very special moment when I receive the bread, or when somebody else does. Because it even goes back to what you had stated, I think, in the first video. I'm losing track. This is video 48. But I think it was in the first video of you saying, I think it would be different. I would not, once we get back into, maybe this is the next video, when we get back into our services, what you're saying that one bishop or somebody said about being at the Vatican and the Pope celebrating and the Pope receiving the elements and nobody else, like, to me, I wouldn't even be comfortable doing that. Could I do it if we get back in our buildings and there are 50 people there and they're 6 feet apart or whatever? Could I raise the elements and do that and then just consume them myself, and everyone receives it, in a different, like they receive it because it was offered? Yes, but I don't know if I would want to do that. I think I'd be like, no, I have to be able to give it to you.
Yeah, right, exactly. Well, see, that would, that's initially one of the differences that Luther talks about, no matter what, because that was the practice for so long in the Roman Catholic Church, just in general. The priest stands up there, says the words, does all, his fancy transubstantiation and everything. Ooh, big words, right? A little bit.
Yeah.
And
ring the bells. Yeah.
And he's like, all right, so we're all taking this. And then he ate it and drank.
Yeah.
And no one else did. It was just like that celebration, if you could call it that.
Yeah.
But as Lutherans, my understanding would be, even when we got back together, we would not do that because that is Roman Catholic. Nothing against them. It's just, that's one of those differences.
Right.
So it wouldn't be a question of us doing that, I don't think. Oh,
but is there then a difference between doing that? I think that kind of comes back to my point of there's an interaction that happens in the sacrament. And even though there are always, as I've stated, and I think we both stated, even though there are always exceptions to the rule, there's always some kind of potential emergency that pops up or something that we would say, yes, we can do this, but with all things being equal, if there's no extenuating circumstances, this is how we do it. This is our practice. And I think that's probably why this discussion is even happening, is because this is an extenuating circumstance. Normally, we would never do this. However, and I think maybe that goes back to what I'd said earlier about the 6-month thing, is right now I'm okay with it because I can see a light at the end of the tunnel and go, this is what's going to happen. If someone told me this is just the way it's going to be from now on, let's not even say 6 months. Let's say we get into like a Russia thing where, and I'm probably making this up, under Soviet rule and the church gets outlawed and therefore we can't meet and all that stuff. Like if we thought for the next 5 years we were going to be separated from people, would we figure out another way to do it? And there's a part of me that thinks, yeah, we'd probably figure out another way to do it if we knew it was going to be this long and it wasn't going to be, the next month or two.
I think that's a good point. And I just want to reiterate this, again, in this is just a discussion. There's no right or wrong. It's a brainstorm. So if you're watching this and you're saying, oh, Pastor Jeff thinks this, and oh, Pastor Andrew thinks this. It's really a discussion because, I can't remember if I said in one of these or maybe before we started, but I know I said to you, no, I forgot what I was going to say. No,
it was great.
It was great. All these videos and these experts and bishops that are talking about things, they don't really answer either. There's no real answer. It's just like this discussion. But it's interesting that you bring that up because, if it's like, oh, well, we're going to be doing this for at least 5 years, I think that's what would energize us to find there would be a new way. We would find a new way to do it. If we were under persecution, I mean, that totally, I think, redefines the importance of the sacrament for us. Right. I think we would find a new way to do that and celebrate that together. And I think that would bring up a very interesting question, because if we were being persecuted for our faith, I think that really pushes us in our faith to ask, just how important is it for me to have communion?
Yeah.
Because we'd be risking our lives to do that.
Yeah, we would. Yeah. And I definitely think that, to be able to say, because as of right now, at least within our hospital structure in Ohio, I can't just go in and visit people in the hospital.
Yeah.
Would I be willing to go and try to break the law to go visit them? But I think that brings up a question too, who's that, what you keep saying, and I've not addressed it till right now, but I think is a whole nother discussion potentially, is that idea, that belief of priesthood of all believers, because that is a sticking point for me. That's one of the things I wrestle with by saying, technically anybody can baptize if we're, especially in emergency, can anybody preside at communion? I would want to say yes. All right. But then if you're allowing it, then what's the difference between doing it, and a church service? And what does it mean then for, best practices kind of thing? So I guess to try to wrap this one up, because we've gone over 15 this time, I just let it go because I'm like, we're just going to do this. That if you're in episode 3 and you stayed with us, then if this goes 6 minutes over, you're already in for the long haul at this point. So just ride it out. You were going to click on episode 4 anyway, so just ride that thing out. That the equal aspect for me isn't paramount for deciding what we do with communion. I guess the way I'd wrap it up is, and these are just thoughts as you stated, my thought at this moment as part of this discussion is, I'm still not comfortable with doing virtual communion at this point in time. I am still placing a priority on us being, the community being together, as one of the prerequisites for us to have it. It doesn't mean that once we get together, we're going to have it right away, but I think it's a prerequisite for it to happen. And even if I can't, because, and this is, maybe say something to this, Andrew, is my guess is that if I wanted to find either biblical evidence, doctrinal evidence, whatever, theological, to argue either side of this, I could.
Yeah.
I could say, all right, well, this says this. And then you could come back and go, but this says this, which kind of goes into the whole idea of what you'd said earlier about this being a conversation. But so, I mean, if one of the members of the congregation where I serve, or if anyone watching this said, like, well, why would you have this approach to it? I think part of it is my theological understanding of it, my biblical understanding of it. But then all of that is also weighed with my experience and my personal interpretation of it. And to be honest, the other part would be, luckily, because I don't know what I would have done if the church-wide would have come out and Bishop Eaton would have said, we really want you to do virtual communion. Luckily, the bishop, I'm on the same side as the bishop right now. So I can go, well, see, that's what we're supposed to do, really. But I don't know how that would have been different. But I think that gives credence to yours, mine, anybody who's in the same boat to say, all right, well, we're talking to other pastors. We're talking to, hear from the bishop. And really, I don't know if for the people, you had mentioned that there are other people, other colleagues you have, I don't know if they're ELCA colleagues that are doing virtual communion or if they're other denominations, but are you briefly able to give like what their reasoning is, and whether when you hear it, if you're just like, yeah, no, that doesn't make any sense, or whether you go, no, I get it.
Oh yeah, so there are other ELCA pastors that are doing that. So I mean, you said if the bishop said we really want you to do this, then you'd have an issue. Well, it's the opposite. So the bishop said we're not going to do that, and these pastors are saying, yeah, I'm not comfortable with that. I think this, and I think what it comes down to in their argument is because there's the two pieces of communion. Is it more important to experience the real presence, or is it more and honor that, or is it more important to honor the community? Mm-hmm. And it's this balance. And it's interesting because as I think about it, that's their reasoning is, well, it's about the community, not necessarily the community together, but it's the serving of people. This one pastor said, oh, well, I go, and he said, I go and I stand outside their window at their house, and then they go get whatever. And again, I go like that. He's like, they go
pretzels.
Yeah, they go and get whatever, and then I say the words. So in a sense, it's a home visit, but through the window. But then he said he only does that because in his worship services, he'll do virtual communion because it's about the community. But then in my argument, my stance right now is, but it is about community, but it's about the community physically together. Mm-hmm. So it's really community and how we understand that. And then what I would want to add to that is, just like everything, you said, well, I could say this, and then you could argue this, and we could argue. Right. That's everything.
Yeah.
We get back together. It's like, well, okay, how are we going to do communion now? Well, I think intinction and common cup are kind of out of the question.
Right.
But then it's like, well, okay, we'll do individual cups. But I mean, you can find issues with everything. Mm-hmm. So it's like, so then what it comes back to community, it's like, but what would be best for the community that we're a part of, the community that you and I serve? So, I mean, everybody's got to figure that out. And I think that all goes back to one of the reasons I felt called and drawn to the ELCA is we can differ on things, and we can, we need the Kyrie in every worship. And then you go to another one and they're like, yeah, we do that every once in a while, or no, we don't care for that. We like to sing this. But still, we're all worshiping the same God, and God can do anything.
Right.
So it all comes down to, I think, even connected to all the other stuff we're talking about, what does communion mean to us? Why is it important to us? Do we want, if ourselves included, if right now everyone, I don't know if there's a pun or not, but if everyone's chomping at the bit to have communion, even if it's virtual, is it because we long for the way it was and we need that? Or is there something else? Was it just, see, I wrote this down. Does virtual communion seem attractive because it is indeed feeding and reminding us of how it was? Or is it we're seeking, whatever? And then see that connects, because it's almost like you wrote these notes right here. Perhaps what we need to do is seek new ways until the old ways are safe and beneficial. But even then, maybe, We are called, I think, right now to, in a sense, continue this evolution in the church and adapt to the world around us. Now, let me be clear, not adapting to the world,
Right.
but the church working with the world and what's happening.
Yeah, because it's our mission to work within the world, and
Yeah.
we have to find ways to do that. Yeah, no, I agree with that, and I like that. And like I said before, we could talk about this forever. We'll probably in our next one, we'll probably focus more on what it means, practical things or discussions, what it means to do communion, how we might do that once we return to worship, community worship in person, I should say. Yeah, I really think that hopefully if people are watching this, that they'll take that away, that this is something for hopefully that's conveyed. It's something that for myself and for Pastor Andrew, the sacrament of the altar, the Holy Communion is extremely important and significant to both of us. And it's not something to be taken lightly, even though we believe in open table and all of that. But just the means of grace that it provides is so significant and so beefy is not the word I want to use, but I just used it. It has so much, so abundant that we want to make sure that we're caring about keeping that priority while also looking at the priority of the church and looking at the priority of health of individuals, of the whole community. So, so I think all of that's absolutely fantastic. And I think you did an amazing job. I learned a lot. I want to give, as I promised, a quick story, a quick little extra peek behind the curtain of my memory and Pastor Andrew. So seminary starts off, and I had been at seminary. I got to seminary back in 2001. I got there back in July because I had started with summer Greek classes. Pastor Andrew ended up coming in August, I believe, when the first fall quarter was going to be starting. Fall or September. It was somewhere in there because September 11th was like our second day of school. So it was late August, early September. And it was one of those first days, I want to say then in September, where I didn't really know him yet. We had a class together, and we lived in the same community complex. And so we were walking across the street from the seminary buildings, the education buildings, across the street to where we lived in the apartments. And as we're making our way in a little courtyard, Pastor Andrew looked at me. He's like, and this just sums up the fact that there's 3 episodes on this. Could have been 4. Pastor Andrew looks at me and he goes, "So do you like beer?" and I said, and so me being myself and never having the confidence just to give a straight answer or whatever, I went on like this 5-minute thing of like how I do like beer and maybe kinds of beer I like, and this is when I drink it, this is when I don't drink it, and this huge explanation. And I got to the end of it, and Andrew just said, "Yeah, no, that's great. No, I've been making some beer. I have some in my house. Do you want to come over and have some?" Like, I didn't need this huge explanation. So maybe everybody didn't need these huge explanations, but that was it. So we, and I was like, "Yeah, oh yeah, totally." And we went over, and he had been making a beer. I don't know if it was in your bathtub or wherever you made it, but we drank it, and
There's the toilet.
Games, yeah. turlet beer. And that's when I got severely sick and was admitted to the hospital for 4 weeks. So we did that, and we talked theology while playing video games, drinking beer, and listening to Tenacious D. So just a little background. Almost 20 years ago, it's about 19 years ago. Man, we were getting old. That is ridiculous. Yeah. When we met, 19 years. So I'll try to make sure I have enough Andrew stories that I can share in the future. But that's your little tidbit for this week. That is correct, right? That's a correct memory.
That is correct.
You were like, "Do you like beer?" And I just ran in it, and you were like thinking the whole time, why is he still talking? I just wanted him to say yes or no. Um,
Well, yeah, because the thing is, I'm extremely introverted, so it took a lot of energy to say that.
just to say, do you like beer?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, because I'm like, yeah, do you want to come over or whatever?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. And I remember going home to my apartment because neither of us had kids yet. I remember going home to my apartment and my wife and telling my wife Melissa about it. She was like, oh, "So you made a friend?" And I was like, "Yeah." And we like this and this. So yeah, so that's how all that started. So good times. The times were
that's
good.
that's interesting because I said the same to Katie, my wife. She's
Yeah.
like, "Oh, you made a friend?" I'm like, "Well, I wouldn't go that far."
I gave him the beer from the toilet. She was
Yeah,
like, "Oh,
no,
you gave him the toilet beer? All right.
no,
So drive him to the hospital."
I'm
Yeah.
just kidding. I'm just kidding.
That was beautiful. I love that. All right. So from me here in parts unknown of Ohio and Pastor Andrew in Rochester, New York, we thank you if you've watched through these. And if you'd like to give us comments, please feel free to give comments. Please make them nice. If you don't like what we had to say, you don't agree. If you want to have discussions, that's fine. But we're not interested in, getting into arguments with people because life is bigger than that and God is bigger than that. And, we just want to love people. So if you have any comments or any future things you'd like to see, please let us know. And hopefully that other than this last episode, hopefully the first two episodes being in a shorter time frame made it more palatable to be able to chop up. So until next week, I would assume,
Sure.
good times. Thank you, sir. I greatly appreciate it. And before you hit stop on the recording, I will say, God's peace be with everyone until we see each other next time.
Yes, thank you very much. See you next time.